about the intersection of space exploration, space travel, how that impacts and inspires humanity, which is such an incredibly important topic this Earth Day and all Earth Days. So first, I'd like to just quickly say who's on with me. So Jeff Hoffman, he is a Hall of Fame astronaut. He has been on the shuttle 5 times, and among his many missions was to essentially put the glasses on Hubble telescope. So Jeff is one of the reasons why we have been getting all of those unbelievable images from the Hubble telescope over the years. He's also a Space Perspective Senior Technical Advisor, and he is the professor of aerospace engineering at MIT with an amazing experiment on Mars that has created the first breathable atmosphere, and soon to be doing a project that is very pertinent for climate change. And Jeff, I hope we'll hear all about that in a bit.
You bet.
And then also with me here is Andrian, who I am so excited to have with us today. An incredible woman. She's an Emmy and Peabody award-winning writer, producer, director. She also happens to be Carl Sagan's wife, longtime collaborator with him. And if you have ever seen that incredible Cosmos series with Carl, and even more recently with Neil deGrasse Tyson, that is in large measure because of Anne's work. Really incredible to have you both on here. It's honestly, it's a dream, and it's a huge honor for me. So, Jeff, let's jump to you real quick and ask you to sort of set this conversation up with talking a bit about, the first time when you looked at Earth, or even after you came back to Earth, this whole deep realization of how finite our planet is and all that goes along with that thought happened. Tell us about that.
Yeah, partly it's a question of seeing something with your own eyes, experiencing it personally. Because, I'm an astronomer by training. I know the Earth is a planet. It's round, it's finite. We have limited resources and so on. I was there at the very first Earth Day in 1970. I'm old enough to be able to say that. But somehow when you see something with your own eyes, everybody's seen pictures of the Grand Canyon, right? But somehow when you're standing there next to the Colorado River and you look up and it's miles high and you see, millions, tens of millions of years of the Earth's history, it just gets you in an emotional way that the picture doesn't. So intellectually, sure, I knew, but and you get up there and you look. The image behind you of the horizon of the Earth with that very thin blue line. Sure, I knew. I've done scientific ballooning. I know that by the time you get up to 100,000 feet, you're up in the blackness of space and the atmosphere is really very thin. But to actually see it. And the other thing I think that is critical for an astronaut's perspective, and why I think so many astronauts come back with an increased sensitivity to having to protect the Earth, is that, you're up there in a spacecraft, you look through the window and realize that on the other side of that window is a vacuum. And most of the universe is like that. It's totally hostile to life. We never sense that here on Earth. The Earth is friendly to life, but we take it for granted. But you go up there and you're in the middle of this hostile environment, which is almost all of the universe. And then you look down at our planet and truly appreciate in a visceral sense, emotionally, how our planet has given birth to life and protects life. And in return, we better protect our planet, because right now it's all we've got.
Whew. Wow. Well, I can't wait to see it with my own eyes. So, Anne, you have talked, sort of bouncing a little bit off of what Jeff was talked about. You've talked a lot about sort of the need for human awakening. And of course, I'm hoping that by taking lots of people to space, we help with some sort of human awakening in the way that Jeff is talking about it. But you recognized this a long time ago, along with Carl, and the whole pale blue dot, the naming, the turning around of the camera to look back at our planet from deep space. I mean, maybe talk a minute, if you would, and set that up for us as well, so we have a deeper understanding of the significance of images like the pale blue dot, and then the incredible poetry that came from it.
Thanks, Jane. Well, Carl and I were working on the Voyager interstellar message. Carl, of course, played a leading role in the science of Voyager and its magnificent reconnaissance of the worlds of the outer solar system. But my role was, the making of the record, curating it, figuring out what to put on it. And Voyager is 1 to 5 billion years long. I mean, when Carl first told me about that in 1976, the idea that the two spacecraft will circumnavigate the Milky Way galaxy perhaps a dozen times before they become so decrepit that their traveling ends. So we put this message on Voyager with a half a dozen other principals collaborating to try to convey something about what it was like to be alive in 1977. And Carl, being that remarkable nexus of the rigor of science and the soaring poetry of the joy of life, had this brilliant idea, which was when Voyager had completed its reconnaissance and taken its 10,000th or 15,000th picture of these worlds and their moons, that it would look homeward. Well, he started feeling 4 years after launch that we should take that picture, and no one at NASA agreed with him. What's the scientific value of looking at a bunch of worlds, which when Voyager 1 was out above the orbit of Neptune, would look just simply like a bunch of dots. But of course, Carl knew that was the point. We were already aware of the environmental depredation of the planet, the annihilation of species, the destruction of the very environment which we need to survive. As even an entry-level organism should be smart enough not to destroy the environment on which its life depends. And that's what we were doing, rushing headlong to do that. So Carl started lobbying NASA in 1981, 4 years after launch, while Voyager still had many years to go in its planetary survey, to say, let's take that picture when Voyager 1 is out by Neptune. And that was because he knew that what was urgently required was an at-a-glance statement of our true circumstances in the universe. Tragically, I think we have been ill-served by so many of our received traditions, which are not at all rooted in nature, and in fact see nature as a kind of enemy. And here we are at this crossroads, where our very future depends upon grasping how critical our tiny, beautiful planet is. And at that same moment that we become an industrial power, our global civilization is capable of destroying the planet for us, not for everyone, but for us and so many other species. At that same moment, we develop the spacefaring capability to actually have some true self-awareness, which is what the pale blue dot image conveys, our true circumstances, not the center of the universe. And once again, displaced by science from our delusions, our infantile delusions of being the center of the universe, instead, the residence of a tiny fraction of a pixel in the cosmic context. And so finally, after lobbying NASA for nearly 10 years, they agreed to command Voyager to look homeward and to see where we really are.
You know, it's great to talk about just being one little pixel, and that image certainly represents the finitude of, or finiteness of planet Earth, which I was talking about before. But you know, if you're a little bit closer, from a cosmic perspective, we can now see the impact of humanity on our planet, and that's pretty scary. That was one of the, I mean, looking at the Earth, yes, there's tremendous beauty. I never got tired of looking out the window during all my space flights. But sometimes it's pretty scary, you know, to see pollution of the oceans, the deforestation,
Yes.
the Amazon, and so on. And we can now see these things on a planetary scale. And you know, when I was young, people in school and you know, talking about the frontier and everything, people talked about conquering nature.
Exactly.
And says, you know, we better not conquer, we can't conquer nature. Nature is what keeps us alive. And the other thing that we learn about in school and also through some travels, there are numerous examples of civilizations on the Earth which have disappeared because of environmental problems, whether it's you know, earthquakes in Crete or droughts in the Southwest United States. But there's no guarantee that a culture will go on forever, and environmental depredation has been responsible for the death of many cultures. I hope that doesn't happen to ours, but if we don't do something about it, you know, we're on a hairy edge right now.
Yeah, so when I was, as you both know, I was in the Project Biosphere 2 for 2 years, where 8 of us were sealed for 2 years and 20 minutes inside really humanity's first attempt at a human-made biosphere, called Biosphere 2, because the idea being that our planetary biosphere is Biosphere 1. And of course, one of the incredible experiences I had in there was really understanding at a visceral level, in the way that you were talking about, Jeff, about really connecting with the planet at an emotional level when you see it with your own eyes from that vantage point. I connected at a visceral level to the biosphere and really understood at a very deep level. No, you don't conquer the biosphere. We're embedded in the biosphere. We are a literal part of the biosphere. And for us, it was incredibly obvious, right? We drank the same water over and over again. Our world was completely sealed. It was sealed at the time tighter than the International Space Station. So we could see the edges of our world in the same way as that image behind me. You can see the edges of our planet. And so actually the words of Carl were a huge inspiration for Biosphere 2. And I've always loved that the pale blue dot, that incredible poetry, brings together nature and humanity, because it's both, right? And sometimes I feel like we put nature and humanity against each other, which is absurd. We're all part of this same system. And what was so inspiring was for him to talk about the history and everything that has ever happened to humanity has happened on this tiny, tiny pale blue dot. And that was incredibly inspiring for us at the Biosphere. And we took that inside with us. Not that we necessarily were the most amazing civilization inside Biosphere 2, because we had our own issues in there, but it was incredibly inspiring and something to attempt to live up to.
I am inspired by both of your courage in these different ways. I feel like, you know, I'm all talk because I have not been to space, and I've certainly not lived in the kind of confinement. That is such a great analogy.
You are not all talk. I mean, you have done so many incredible things. So,
well, and I also think
that to both of you.
So Anne, I think let's remember that when we're taking people to space, it is incredibly, I mean, it's not just important, it is crucial that we take people to space that are communicators, that can feel this experience, that can have the experience that Jeff and others have had, and I have had in a very different way, and really absorb that experience and then communicate it out to the rest of us in very different ways. I mean, you know, your life has been such a part of creating culture, and that's incredibly important. I think it is just critical. And if you both don't mind, I would love to actually hear Carl's words a moment.
Wow.
And I want to thank you also for allowing us to use Carl's words. I can't tell you how much I am just so thankful for that. So thank you.
Well, what really moved me about what you're doing is the carbon neutral aspect of it. Yes, to make the experience of seeing the Earth in the blackness of space, that is a very powerful experience, but also to do it without trespassing on the environment is really made it seem to me that it was something that Carl would definitely support. And he would have actually been very excited about what you're doing.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and play this spot that we created using some of Carl's words, which we're super excited to be bringing to the world in partnership with you and also with the Earth Day organization, which we're also super excited to be partnered with.
From this distant vantage point, the Earth might not seem of any particular interest. But consider again that dot. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you ever heard of, every human being who ever was, lived out their lives. The Earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. For the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. It underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
That voice is so redolent with truth and so from the heart, but also so learned, so wise. Carl's death in 1996 was a tremendous tragedy personally and for our family, but I think it was also a real disaster for our planet, because here was a man who was known in 200 countries on Earth and who was really, from my, I declare my bias, but from my point of view, incorruptible. Eyes always on the prize. And you can look at what he wrote 60 years ago, 50 years ago, and there's no cringing, no need to make any excuses like you have to understand that was the time. No, the world is just catching up with him. And, just imagine someone who could go on the Johnny Carson show in the 1970s after seeing Star Wars and turn to Johnny and say, where are all the Black people? Why is this, what's wrong? There's something wrong with this picture. And, because he was that person inside out, through and through. And his perspective was informed by the timescales that science reveals, our place in the universe. When you were talking earlier, and you were talking about the conquest of Earth, which was such a theme of my coming of age also. We used to talk about the conquest of space as if we'd made our first few baby steps in Earth orbit at that time. I don't think we'd even been to the moon yet. and the arrogance, that anthropocentric perspective, which is killing us. Anyway, I'm sorry. I hear Carl's voice and I just get carried away.
No, it's really lovely. And I wished I had had the opportunity to meet him. It would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Jeff, I remember very, very clearly when you told me about when you were out on EVA and you saw Earth for the first time from that vantage point. It still sticks with me.
We do a lot of training to learn how to use a spacesuit, and you have to do it underwater because the spacesuit is really heavy, so you can't really operate in it just walking around on our planet. But underwater, we're neutrally buoyant, and so I had spent, a lot of time underwater. On my very first space flight, I was one of the 2 crew trained to use a spacesuit, although we weren't planning to do a spacewalk. But one of the 2 satellites that we deployed from the shuttle didn't turn on. And so NASA decided to send me and my partner out. They had never done an unplanned spacewalk before in the history of NASA, but we went out and did it. So, all right, I'm in the airlock. I opened the door, the hatch. I float over sort of on my stomach to the tool chest to get all the tools and put them on my tool carrier. And I remember thinking to myself, boy, this really feels like when we did in the water tank. That was great training. And then I turned around and there was the Earth and the sky, and oh my God, it's like in the Wizard of Oz. Oh my God, Toto, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. And just that was when it first, the entirety of the thing first hit me, because you're not just looking through a window. I've got a big helmet, and so you're immersed. I think big windows in the space perspective capsule are going to allow some of that sort of 360-degree perspective, and it's a lot different from looking out a porthole. So yeah, that's a moment I'll never forget. Oh my God, we had said beforehand when we went out, we don't, the commander said, look, we're doing an unplanned spacewalk. I don't want to hear any, oh no, oh what's this, and but I couldn't help myself. Oh my gosh, wow.
Wow. And what a feat that was. I remember where I was standing when I heard the news with Carl in our kitchen of what you had achieved, and just the astonishing cleverness. And, that's it. We humans have such a capacity for courage, as Jeff has, and skill and cleverness and ingenuity. So that's what gives me hope in this emergency, is that we're capable. We have such a steep learning curve. I always think Voyager, an interstellar mission, was launched 20 years after Sputnik. Sputnik, the very first time any human had ever sent anything into space, any object. And in 20 years, we were doing these remarkable things. And so in even less than that time, we were walking on the moon. So that's what gives me hope about what we can do if we are inspired by experiences such as space perspective and the incomplete spectrum of ways that it's possible for us to understand and get a grip on reality.
Yeah, so I think, sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
We can never lose hope. I mean, that was the only good thing that came out of Pandora's box, right? Was hope.
Yeah.
But hope by itself is not enough. It takes a lot of hard work and in some cases sacrifices to change our course from what's happening now to our planet and make it survivable.
Well, and I think inspiration is so critically important for this. right? What gets me up in the morning to take 8 passengers and a captain in a pressurized capsule to space with these huge windows and all of that, using a space balloon like the one behind me, is because we want to inspire the world to greatness. When you hear about stories who, I grew up in England, so I wasn't in America, around the time when people were walking on the moon and all of that. But I hear stories from people who were, and the level of inspiration that came from that, from shuttle missions, from people going to space, and now with people going up on SpaceX's Crew Dragon and other vehicles. It really inspires people. Back in the day when we were doing Apollo, it was like, well, if we can go to the moon, we can do X, Y, Z, right? That was such a hard thing. We can surely do anything else. We don't really hear about that anymore because that was probably so long in the rearview mirror. But I'm completely with you, Anne. And so, I'm incredibly excited to take as many people as we can to have this experience. I mean, I want to see huge impact from taking people up. It's been really interesting. I don't know what your personal experience is, Jeff, but the people have been, Frank White is a writer about what he calls the overview effect, what we call the space perspective. Oh, sidebar, space perspective. When we were coming up with the name of the company, Space Perspective, we'd come up with the name Space Perspective. And of course, the first thing you do is you go online and Google it and see who else is using Space Perspective. The only person we found was you, Jeff, who had done this amazing talk about the Space Perspective, which was super cool.
In any case, I didn't copyright it, so you're more than free to use it as the name of the company. And of course, I'm excited about the company as I was. I should say for people, how did I get involved in this is, I've known you, Jane, and Tabor ever since you came out of Biosphere 2. I remember I invited you to come and talk to the astronaut office because I thought some of the interpersonal experiences that you had would be of interest for, long duration space flight on the space station and beyond someday. And I visited your facility and when you started Paragon and out in Tucson, and that's turned out to be a great environmental control system company, done some great things. And so yeah, when I heard you were starting up Space Perspective and going to do the ballooning, you guys know what you're doing, and I was excited, so I've been happy working with you. It's been great.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, and of course, for us, it's about impact, right? It's what is the positive impact we can make. And what I was going to ask you, Jeff, is, I have heard people talk about, when they come back from space, there's sort of this burning need to get involved in something bigger than themselves, whether that's, more social, environmental, helping, even for some, it's going further out into space. Right? Was your experience that? Because I am hoping that some portion of the people we take to space return with an urgent need to do something themselves if they aren't already.
Yeah, and I was trying to explain at least my thoughts about why this seems to be so widespread among astronauts, people who have been in space. And as I said, I think the fact that we really appreciate the hostility of almost the entire universe to life, it makes the Earth that much more special. And it's something you experience, personally. So yeah, many astronauts have come back, and it seems to cut across the political spectrum. People who may be very conservative in their politics, very liberal in their politics, but the Earth is not political. The Earth is a living planet, and regardless of what your politics, if the environment goes bad on us, we're all in the same planet. We're all in the same boat, so to speak, in cosmic space, and we mess up our Earth, and politics becomes trivial by comparison.
And
Okay,
yet,
so go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Anne.
I just want to interject that, and yet there is an asymmetry in the degree of concern about the environment politically. And that can't be denied, when we talk
I know
about getting off.
that's why I specifically mentioned among the astronauts. I think that the experience of seeing the Earth from space has overridden what might be,
Yes,
an initial,
agreed.
going in one direction or the
Yes,
other. It's just
I agree. And, just think about the connection between that first frame-filling vision of the Earth that Apollo gave us, and the origins of the environmental movement. It's 1969, and then 1970 is the first Earth Day. And it's the beginning. I mean, I feel that in some sense that has been a gift of Apollo, is that kind of degree of self-awareness about the planet.
So if you guys could send anybody to space to have that experience that Jeff has had and has talked about today, who would that be?
Do we have to bring them back?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, we have to bring them back. Sorry, Jeff.
Well, that eliminates a few people. No,
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, people who are in a position to make a difference are the people who are going to make a difference. It goes beyond just political leaders who usually come to mind first, but people who influence other people are the people who need to have this experience and get them on board.
And if this, go ahead.
I was going to say that, some of the people that I think we're all thinking about, who you would love to embrace a planetary perspective, I wonder if they would be changed by this experience. I'd like to think that everyone would, but I also feel that there's some, perspectives that are so ingrained that.
There were certainly, there were some of the priests who refused to look through Galileo's telescope, right?
Exactly right.
They didn't want to see.
They didn't want to see.
Yeah, and in that case, I think what's really important is to go for the younger generation.
Yes.
Some of the people who are, dyed in the wool with their old attitudes are not going to be here forever. And it's the younger generation who is going to have to deal with what we've left them.
Exactly. Another reason for hope, really, because, I wouldn't want it to be the other way around, where the people coming up were going to be more intransigent than the people who have had the lever arm on the world. And so that's another source of hope.
Yeah, there's a nice expression which I've heard and have used on numerous occasions. We often talk about how we've inherited the earth from our predecessors. I look at it differently. I like to think of it as we have the earth on loan from the younger generation, and we've got to give it back to them. Right now, I'm embarrassed when I look at my grandchildren and my children, and we're handing over a lot of problems to them. That's the way it is, but they're the people who are going to have to live with it and hopefully fix it.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the last, I want us to end on an up note.
Okay.
So in the last couple of minutes we have, and you have talked a lot, and you even mentioned in the beginning about new rituals.
Yes.
So as we think about new rituals that we would like to impart, to encourage in all generations, talk about that a minute. What do you have in mind
Well, I'm very proud to say that my daughter, Sasha Sagan, has written a magnificent book called For Small Creatures Such as We, which is about this idea of the new rituals that that we need. Because, as I said at the beginning of our conversation, I feel that our received traditions have, for the most part, been woefully separate from nature and very often conceived with the idea that there's some way to suppress nature, to control, to conquer, to be stewards of nature, as opposed to recognizing our part in nature, in the fabric of life. And that's why I love science so much, because it has, if anything has, it has been the only thing that has been able to wean us from this infantile centrality, as the crown of creation on life here, and as the center of the universe in the larger cosmos. And so, yes, the rituals, we have to begin to adapt rituals that celebrate the 4.5 billion year legacy, continuous thread of life that all of us are descended from. Not, not beings who just happen to land here as adults, as in our mythology, without a childhood, without a past, without a connection to all of life. And so, I dream of an educational system and a religious framework which makes nature and the beauty of life and its ancient continuity foremost, and sees each of us, as Jeff was saying, as borrowing this beautiful world from the future, from the next generation. And our minimal task is to be able to hand it off in a way that is healthier than it was when we came here. We're not there yet, but we could get there if we took our minds off consumption and stopped worshiping those consumers at the top of this pyramid who consume the most, and instead began to really see that we were made for this planet. It took 4.5 billion years for it to lead up to this moment. The whole future of the universe is far longer. And we can be good links in the chain of generations of life. That's the task before us. This, I think of Carl as being one of the greatest awakeners in our history. And I think what he was trying to awaken us to is the great beauty of life, its preciousness, and our responsibility to do what we can to preserve it.
Jeff, as someone who has seen our planet from space, I'm going to give you the last word. What message do you have for all of us this Earth Month?
It's the only planet we have. And it's keeping us alive in a very, very hostile universe. Life evolved here, as Anne said. It took a long time for evolution to produce us humans, and we don't want this to be the end state. We've got hopefully a long time ahead of us, lots of possibilities for humanity. We've learned how to leave our planet. If there's anything that you learn from a space mission, it's what it means to be in a finite environment. You're in a spacecraft. Everything that you have is with you, and you better keep things clean. You better take care of it. You don't want to foul your nest. What I really hope for, and space perspective can play a part in this. If people could only appreciate the finiteness of our planet. We're in a closed system. We are not infinite. And it's hard when you're on the surface of the earth. You look up at the big blue sky, it looks like it goes on forever. The ocean looks so big. I mean, like, oh yeah, we can put whatever we want into the ocean. It's not going to make any difference. It's so big. The atmosphere, we can put anything we want in. It's not going to, not true. These things are finite, and until we realize this and learn to live within the finite nature of our environment and planet Earth, we're not going to be doing the right thing for the future generations. So the Earth is right now all we've got. It's our nest, and let's not foul our nest. We've got one home planet. Let's take good care of it.
I want to thank you both. It's been incredible spending this time with you. Thanks very much.